Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from 2006. On the white end, Deep Fritz, one of the top engines at the time, playing against Vladimir Kramnik. They actually played a 6-game mini match. In the end, Deep Fritz won, scoring 4 points. That's 2 wins and 4 draws. This is game 2 from that match. One that is primarily positional, out of this Queen's Gambit accepted. Now, despite how this game ends, Kramnik has a very serious blunder. I believe Deep Fritz was outplayed in this game. Let's see how. We continue with e4. Nowadays, the popular response to White's pawn center is e5, immediately challenging the duo. In this game, however, it's b5, noted as the Greco variation. Black clings to the c4 pawn. And the response here is a4, trying to undermine the support of c4. Kramnik follows with c6. If you're going to, as black, defend b5 with the pawn, c6 is definitely the way to do it. a6 would be no defense at all. Black would experience a problem on the a file. There's a pin. So, c6 it is. White continues here with knight c3. What's considered best, however, is to first initiate the capture on b5 and only then knight c3. For what reason or reasons is it best to first take on b5? Well, for one, White gets the open file, half open file. And two, White has now softened a couple key squares on Black's queen side, namely d5 and b5, the very squares that the c-pawn was controlling. This is where it wants to next play knight c3. Best here would be queen b6 defending the b-pawn. How easy would it be for Black to mess up in a position like this? Maybe pretty easy. How tempting might the move b4 be? This would be a blunder. White is winning now. Why? This guy's not easily kicked. The a-pawn is not even a threat. White's ready to simply develop, recapture a pawn, or even connect with the invasive knight on c7. In the end, White's big pawn center would be king. So, in this game, we don't have the capture on b5. It's an immediate knight c3. Now you can, as Black, play b4 without fear of forward moves. We still have that c-pawn around. Got to run in reverse now. Knight a2 it is. Some more development. Knight f6. Play follows with e5. If White takes on b, that would not be good because Black would take the much more valuable e4 pawn, center pawn. So it's e5, knight d5. White regains the material. And after these 9 moves, there are many positional notes to make. Here's how my eye sees it, at least. We have this invasive e5 pawn. White has space on the king side. Black has space on the queen side. In general, each side should be looking to play on the side of the board where they have space. We see that in this game. Also, we have a couple knights that stick out. This guy right here, excellent outpost square d5. This guy on a2, currently a struggling piece. Black's queenside structure could not be broken down. It's going to require a few tempi before this guy is back in business. Also, a couple cases here of backward pawns. Black will be looking to play c5. For what reason? I could actually provide 2. One is to undermine the support of e5, and the other is just to get out of the way. Give me an open file to work with on the side of the board where I have this invasive pawn. Finally, we have also these good and bad bishops. These are the bad bishops. in this position, judging by the fixed pawns in the center. Okay, this actually shows up in a couple instances in this game, good and bad bishops. In fact, right away, bishop g5, there's this question, should I block as black? Should I block and develop? Computer says you could play in this way, but Kramnik goes in a different direction. He plays queen to b6. He is, in other words, not welcome to trading his good bishop for white's bad bishop. This guy, keep in mind, is patrolling an important diagonal. These two squares, d6 and c5, are both holes in black's camp. So a crushing position would be one where there are no dark square bishops, and somehow this knight eventually gets here and then drops into one of these two. That would be a positional crush for white. Okay. That's going to require many moves, however. Knight c1 follows. Bishop a6, doing what? Welcoming bad bishop for good bishop. We continue in this game with queen to e2. If white initiates the capture, at first glance I thought to myself, okay, best is to recapture with the piece that isn't yet playing, the knight. In other words, where it supports this advance. Best recapture, however, would be with the queen. The knight is better placed on d7. There's a similarity here, whether you're on a6 or d7, both support c5, but the main difference is that from d7, the knight exerts direct pressure on e5. Black is that much closer to swiping that pawn once there isn't a d4 pawn around. In this game, no bishop takes bishop, queen e7. I had one quick look at, can white maybe be kind of clever here and play b3, saying you take me, I recapture with the pawn and scare your knight away from the outpost square. d5 would no longer be an outpost if there's a white pawn on c4. The serious drawback, of course, with b3 is that c3 would become a hole and the knight could immediately pounce. All right, in this game, queen e2, straight away. h6, excellent move to flick in here. The bishop is flexible on g5. If it wants to stay on this diagonal, maybe ruling out bishop to e7, bishop h4 would be a blunder here because the knight can jump into f4. Queen is hit, queen has a responsibility, problem on g2, winning. This would be winning for black. So white must respond, in other words, in a way where the bishop still controls f4. Bishop e3 does just that. Bishop e3 also keeps in mind this eventual c5 pawn break. White knows this is what black wants. We continue, get the light square bishop exchange in there. More development. Knight is finally back in business, exerting pressure on a5. A bit uncomfortable in general when you have this minor piece putting pressure on a pawn and a major piece has the responsibility to defend that pawn. All right, bishop e7 follows. And in this position, we have rook to c1. Immediate pressure is applied to c6. After I saw how this game played out, I thought to myself, I wonder if it would have been better if white maybe castled and then put the other rook on c1. There's a reason, in other words, to maybe keep this rook around defending the a pawn. In this one, it is rook c1 right away. And now, how should black defend c6? I'll throw this to you as a pop quiz. How would you respond to white's last move? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, give yourself a pat on the back if you came up with this next move. Continues to develop. Castles is best. It's okay to give up this pawn. Black would get the pawn back and be clearly better. Black would love to have the queens off in this position. This knight is enormous on d5. Who's going to challenge that guy? no light square bishop around because of that earlier bad for good bishop exchange. If white in this position takes on c6 in the game, it's castles. If white takes on c6, how does black get the pawn back? Well, knight on 7 to b6, and there's no defending a4. Soon black will work with a 2-to-1 majority. Black would be in the driver's seat in this ending, for sure. So, castles it is, met with castles, and now rook on f to c5, gearing up for the c5 break. Queen gets out of the way, c5, knight on f3 to d2, getting out of the way of the queen. She's going to drift over to this h5 square. Possible sacrifices on h6. Also the knight ready to pounce on c4 or even e4. From this e4 square, it would connect really well with this invasive e5 pawn. The follow-up here is queen to c6, and we're seeing now some pressure on that a4 pawn. Queen h5 follows, and the follow-up here is queen takes on a4. Now, before Kramnik could pull this move off, certainly one of the things he had to consider is possible sacrifice on h6. That would not be working. So he does take on a4. The follow-up is knight takes c5. What's the story if bishop takes h6 instead of knight takes c5? This would not be good for white because it's just one piece near the king side. And this guy is an excellent defender. Also important to note, there is plenty of stable defense over f6. Got the bishop, knight, bishop and both knights controlling f6. So even if this knight drops in there, it can be eliminated. Black is winning in this position. White doesn't have an easy way to lift a rook towards the king side either. So the timing is not right for a sacrifice in short on that h6 square. In this game, we now have a series of exchanges. In fact, this is capture 1 of 8 consecutive captures coming up here. We quickly find ourselves in an endgame after the smoke clears. Knight takes c5, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, knight takes bishop, removing the defender of c5. We're not done yet. Pawn takes, we got these double isolated pawns and now a newly opened file. There's an issue on f7. Bishop takes c5, queen takes f7 check, king h8. A lot of forcing moves. Officially an endgame. The reply now is queen to f3, and Kramnik must have certainly felt comfortable at this stage in the game. Why? Well, he's essentially up a pawn. These two are negated by the e6 pawn, and the big pawns in the position are on the queen side, this 2-to-1 majority. Also, there's, this, you could kind of feel confident, let's say, playing as black here when white's last move is one that retreats and is specifically there to just defend. That's its sole purpose. Queen f3, defend the pawn. This is not ideal for white to have the queen have this defensive task. There are no threats generated by white with this last move. We continue here with rook to f8. This is considered a best move. And the queen goes to e4. Now, at first glance, you may say to yourself, well, isn't the queen helped? Isn't she better on e4 than f3? Normally, you kind of look at it as, yeah, she's helped. But in this particular case, the piece that really wants to be on e4 is the knight. That's the optimal square for the knight. So, there's a coordination issue that black is forcing on white's end here. The alternative is to go to e2, she's demoted a little bit, and okay, this knight still has the e4 square. In this game, the queen still takes up this central post. Follow up, queen to d7, counterattack against the knight. Knight b3. If the knight doesn't attack the bishop, let's say goes to c4 instead, focusing on this d6 square, black would be doing really well. This is considered a winning position, queen to d6, offering a queen exchange. No queens on, there's no fear of anything bad happening to black's king, and these guys are going to push through. This 2-to-1 majority is going to be the winning way for black. So it's knight b3 here. Black does not have time for queen d5. Bishop has to do something. Simple enough. Backs off. The knight is dominated, and the queen is restricted. Black is certainly for choice here. We follow with rook on f to d1, queen f7, trying to get into f2 possibly, rook f1. This is another sign that black is definitely the better side here. If the queen comes back over, are we just going to be repeating? Is this the best that white has? Kramnik goes for more here. He plays queen a7, 2 on the e3 pawn now. Follow up, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and now knight to d4. Play continues here with a4. What's considered best is rook to d8. Now, I want to put on a couple variations if this move was played. Do know that this is not a problem for black because bishop takes with check is there. We would have this fork. If the king goes to f1, there would be multiple ways out of this fork. Majors can go to the f-file with check. And if the king goes to the corner, you could always swipe the rook without fear of losing the queen because black would win the king. Also, knight takes rook here. There's queen d7 targeting the knight, looking for a back rank mate. Okay. Black wouldn't have to worry about knight c6 in this position. And if knight takes d6, we would have this and then that. And similar story here, queen d7 targeting the knight. And we got that mate threat as well. All right, at the end of the day, no rook to d8. Instead, he advances his 2-to-1 majority. Knight takes e6 follows. Bishop takes e3 check, king in the corner. Bishop takes rook, knight takes rook, and pop quiz. How would you continue in this position? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, Kramnik's move is a serious blunder. He ends up playing queen to e3, and I imagine part of his thinking before playing queen to e3, one of the things he was probably calculating is, okay, if this knight goes to g6 check, I can go here, and if there's another check, I could go here and I'd be winning. I'm attacking the knight, offering a queen exchange, possible back rank mate, and if we have a queen exchange, I would certainly be winning. There would be no stopping the passed a pawn. Unfortunately, though, for Kramnik, he overlooked a mate in one. Queen h7 ends the game. Happens to the best of us. Why exactly was that one overlooked? Can't be sure, of course. This knight is rarely, it's rarely the case a white knight is on f8. Now, if this knight was on a much more common square, let's say g5, plenty of cases where you see a knight get to g5, I think that mate threat would certainly be seen, but for whatever the reason, there was a serious blind spot there. There's a nice photo of actually this very moment right here, where Kramnik is crunching the numbers, ready to make the big blunder on e3. Yeah, had a serious brain cramp, but again, happens to the best of us. Even GMs can miss a mate 1 threat. So I don't think there was any time pressure involved. I guess the hand placement in a way is a tell. Doesn't seem to be in a rush to make a move or anything, but yeah, again, happens to the best of us. And overall, though, this game here, a well played game, close to maybe a model game out of this Queen's Gambit accepted, I'd say. Anyhow, what are your thoughts on this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.